That is Warren Tillman, the medical examiner in the Coggins trial out of Georgia, the racially motivated case. We are going to continue with that trial, but real quick, we're going to switch gears. And because we are covering another Georgia case. Georgia is really hot today. Another case. We have one of our very own Law&Crime hosts out in Georgia in the courtroom helping us cover this case. It's Vincent Hill. This case is Georgia versus Leon Williams. The adopted father is charged in the murder of his 10-year-old son, Kente Williams. He's accused of burning his boy's feet with hot water and then dunking his head in and out of water, holding it down for 35 to 45 seconds at a time. Unfortunately, the 10-year-old boy died. Why? Because the parent supposedly wanted to have better parenting skills because the kid was acting up in school. If you ask me, this is cruel and unusual parenting. The father, who was a foster father, adopted the child and apparently also tried to do CPR on the child with the paramedics, but it was just too late. That cute face, you see it on the screen, that 10-year-old boy had been from foster home to foster home to foster home and then ends up in a home and adopted where there's 3 incidences of possible abuse. All Child Protective Service workers were fired for neglecting and not handling this abuse properly. Vincent, good to see you.
Likewise, Carissa, and it is hot in Georgia. Literally, it's about 95 degrees. I'm outside of the courtroom here in Decatur, Georgia.
Yeah, so just a little background. Vincent and I met on the Nancy Grace set about 3 years ago, and he's my buddy out there in Atlanta. So I love seeing you on set. It's the first time we've been together on set on Law&Crime. So,
that's right.
Yeah, no. So it's great that you're in the courtroom. So what's going on in the courtroom there? I know we want to cover this trial as soon as there's something live for us to cover. So give us an update.
Right. So opening statements by the prosecution started at 10:31 this morning. But prior to opening statements, before the jury got in, the prosecution wanted to argue that the defense could not show photos of the defendant and the victim in this case because if he did, he could be called to testify. Now, let's make it clear that the defense did say, well, maybe he will testify in his own behalf. The judge allowed those photos. The prosecution opened their case, basically stating that the defendant in this case, Leon Williams, admitted to the killing to investigators. He admitted to burning his feet. He admitted to holding the victim underwater for 30 to 45 seconds multiple times. He admitted that he actually got up and got dressed, or changed his clothes, rather. When the defense took the stand, those photos that the prosecution didn't want the jury to see were photos of the victim and the defendant in this case. Of course, they were happy photos, painting him to be a great father, pointing out the fact that Leon Williams himself didn't have a father growing up, but he succeeded. He was very successful in his career. He adopted this special needs child. So, of course, the defense wanted to paint that picture that this was not murder. The defense actually started his statement that just because he admitted the death of the victim in this case, Keontae, that doesn't make him a murderer. So the judge did read all counts: malice murder, felony murder, 3 counts of child endangerment, and terroristic threats.
Right. Okay. So, and what our notes here say is 7 counts: malice murder, felony murder, like you said, cruelty to children in the 1st degree, 3 counts, like you said, aggravated assault and family violence, and aggravated battery, family violence. I don't know how he could say this is not murder, because it's clearly murder and child abuse. I mean, he has bumps on his head, bruises on his head 3 months before, a month before, a week before. The stories are changing on the causation of those bruises, and to be dunking a child's head underwater 30 to 45 seconds. Look at that face. He is a baby. That is a baby. That is a 10-year-old. Look, I mean, how can you discipline a child that way? How can go ahead.
Sorry, Carissa.
No.
What the defense tried to paint was that, you know, Leon was having a bad day. He was trying to discipline the victim in this case, little Keontae, who had a bad day in school, and he's a stern disciplinary. So that was the excuse to that. And it wasn't really to kill or hurt the victim in this case. That's how the defense played it during his opening statements. But to your point, how can you argue that when he actually left and changed clothes? It was his mother who called 911. Now, of course, the defense said that Leon, in this case, attempted CPR, which is why he was delayed in calling 911. We don't know that to be factual. His mother's going to take the stand, I believe, on Friday. So we can only speculate on that. Now, the first witness for the prosecution was the victim's first case worker, Gieri Grinderson, and she testified that she actually had the victim in this case, Keontae, in her possession. He actually called her mother. She adopted him out. She would go back to visit him even when he was adopted out. Now, what the defense did play into was the fact that Keontae would act out. He would kick at people. He would act violently, as the defense, portrayed this. But again, you're talking about a 10-year-old child. So to sit there and try to make this victim more of a aggravating factor in this case was, in my opinion, very sickening by the defense.
That 10-year-old child is harmless, and he's a baby. He's small. There's no way he had overpowering factors to be kicking and worthy of this. So we're gonna have to throw to a break. But before we do, I want to ask you one more question, just so we can set the stage, because we haven't had a live feed in that courtroom today that to be following it. We have you in the courtroom. So the jury was seated. We had opening statements. It sounds like you heard from a prosecution witness. So where are we with this case? Because we might come back to it.
So they're resuming at 1:30. The judge sent them to lunch just shortly after 12. Now, he did say each day the lunch break would be about an hour and 15 minutes at the 12 o'clock hour. They ran a little over that on redirect. So he's expected to return to the bench at approximately 1:30, and the prosecution will call their next witness. Now, the jury itself is made up of, I believe, 6 women and 8 men. So I'll be interested to see exactly how this goes. I could kind of tell you who was a mother on that jury just by the looks on their face and how attentive they were, and the amount of notes they were taking during the prosecution's opening statement.
Thank you, Vincent. It's so great to see you and have you there in the courtroom covering this case live. We're going to continue to watch this trial and keep a close eye on it. And if there's anything that we can go back into the courtroom with live, we will do that. We'll bring Vincent back. But right now, we need to throw to a quick break, and then we're going to come back from the break and continue following our other Georgia case, the Timothy Coggins case, the racially motivated cold case from 35 years ago. So please stick with us.